You connect with our loyal listeners at KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black under the bud.
Look, fuck rap, I'm a street legend. Block love me with a deep reverence. I was birthed in a C-section. Helicopters and police presence. We got ops, so we keep weapons. We on y'all block while y'all eat breakfast. A lot of shots, we broke street records. Watch how you talk, I got reflexes. Watching your cheap necklace. Then we slide at the east exit. But every time we get the sub, TMZ catch it. Y'all still learning street lessons. From the mastermind, first you master grind and your team catch it. This time it's for the money, I don't need credit. And I'm the Don cause the street said it. Look, fuck rap, I'm a street legend. And I'm the Don cause the street said it.
Street said it. KBLA Talk 1580. So this is, obviously that's Nipsey Hussle. That'll be the walk-on music for our guest, Assembly Member Isaac Bryan. Is with us, and we're talking climate justice today, but also specifically very resonant, that song, because yesterday, Assembly Member Isaac Bryan and I were at the Together We Thrive conference. Hit Boy was there. He produced that song, so we got all these intersections going on. Assembly Member Isaac Bryan, welcome.
Dominique, it's good to be with you.
It's great to have you in. I was trying to very inarticulately say the committee that you are on that is around where we deal with environmental issues.
Yeah, so it's the Assembly Natural Resource Committee, and it's it's essentially the Assembly's committee on climate change, on land use policy, on it intersects with clean energy, renewable resources, oil drilling, all of those things, recycling, waste management more broadly, kind of the state standards. They all flow through that committee. It's never had a black chair before. This is the first time.
And that's interesting, too. I mean, because as you well know, our major mission this year has been climate justice. But yet, when you talk about a natural resources committee never having had a black chair, It seems ironic given that we are disproportionately impacted by all of the downsides of the list you just gave.
I mean, and truthfully, it's been several decades of political education in our community about the way climate change has negatively and more directly impacted us at the expense of others, and so that's not something we've historically thought about.
Right.
And there's a deep, in California politics, there's a deep intersection between kind of oil industry money and lobbying and where these places are located, and the representatives who want to push back and fight against it. It's hard to fight something that's in your neighborhood.
Yeah, especially when that something in your neighborhood is a monstrous wealth generator.
I mean, the most incredible. They've spent tens of billions of dollars just lobbying California. We just had a special session where we were called back up to Sacramento even after September so that we could hold them even to a greater accountability standard. The governor called that because we saw price gouging, we saw manipulation, and we had to fight to address that. But it's something I've taken on since the day I got into the legislature. It was always clear to me that the oil wells, the oil field, the Inglewood oil field, right across from Kenny Hahn Park, where our kids play soccer, where we sit down and have a picnic, right next to you are oil wells that are lowering your life expectancy, increasing asthma rates, increasing rates of heart condition. And so I've never taken any oil money, and I always decided that I was going to take them on in the fight from the day I got into the legislature.
It's weird, too, because California has that image of being this super green, environmental, hippy-dippy state. But yet we have less restrictions on oil drilling and oil wells than most other states, from my understanding, or we have had previously.
Yeah, we are leading in many, many areas. I think, California, I've gone to global climate conferences, and we're seen as like a subnational, as a country of our own because of our economy, because of the 40 million people we have. And when it comes to setting climate standards and targets, we're phenomenal at it. We love to do this thing where we set targets. By this date, we need this kind of carbon reduction, or we need to transition to electric vehicles, or we need this kind of standard. And, the folks who set those targets, they always set them for right before or right after they leave.
Let's see, when am I termed out? Okay.
That's exactly right.
1 year later is the target.
I've gone back and forth on, whether I hate or love targets, right? I hate that it's, a lot of folks like to do political posturing, act like you did something without actually really doing something. But they also, when you do set a target, it forces the economy, it forces industry, it forces people to start that culture and mind shift. So even if we are late and we set something for 2030, but we don't get there till 2034. If we had never set 2030, would we have ever got there? And so I go back and forth on how I feel about targets.
I want to talk more about the Inglewood oil field, because not just the kids play there. That's where I go to play.
That's right.
I work out there, and I see a lot of, elders. I think we're supposed to say older adults. Right?
Yeah.
Up there walking, stretching, working out, doing yoga, doing Tai Chi. And those are vulnerable populations.
No, absolutely. I have, and if you live in View Park, Baldwin Hills, Ladera, any of the adjacent communities, all the way to Culver City. I mean, the Inglewood oil field is the largest urban oil field in the country. We're talking about, hundreds of acres of active drilling sites. And, I have elders in the community who have told me they feel like they lost their partner, right? They feel like they lost their grandparents. They feel like they lost years on their own life directly because of these oil wells. People who had no respiratory problems. We're talking about active runners who were never smokers, who die from cardiac and respiratory issues that, are hard to directly attribute to anything other than the oil field. And that's really what got me engaged in this issue early on.
So explain the bill that you put forward that was just signed by the governor. We've kind of talked about it, but I don't know that people really understand what just happened.
Well, I think to fully understand it, you got to go back even further than this bill. So 2 years ago, I co-authored a piece of legislation and I jockeyed it in the assembly to create a setback zone. No neighborhood drilling within 3,200 feet of our communities, because all of the health indicated that was the safety buffer you would need. If you were going to drill, no drilling right in our neighborhood, no drilling right by our houses, our hospitals, our schools, our playgrounds. We passed that bill 2 years ago, and the oil company spent $30 million in 3 months to get the signatures they needed to pause the law and put it back on your ballot. So that was going to be on your ballot this year. But once they did that, honestly, I got really frustrated and upset, and so we fought back. And that's called the referendum process. They referendum the law. Previously, the reason corporations would do that is because the referendum is like a yes or no question. But does a yes mean you like the law and a no mean you don't? Or does a no on the referendum mean a yes to the original law?
Right.
It was confusing for voters on purpose. And that's what the companies wanted to do. So last year, we changed those rules with AB 421. And now if there's ever a referendum on your ballot, it won't say yes or no. It'll say keep the law or overturn the law. And that we showed that was super clear for voters and would change the outcomes. Once we did that, we also created a mechanism for the proponents. So if you put up all the money to referendize a law and you change your mind and you want to pull it off the ballot, you can. And you might ask yourself, why would somebody put up $30 million and then just abandon the effort? And it's because we're still swinging at you. Right. So we created that off-ramp for them, and that's when I introduced this bill. I introduced this bill, AB 2719, initially to go statewide. So what we were doing is we were going to attack the low-producing oil wells. Basically, if you're drilling for less than 15 barrels a day, meaning you're not even getting any real oil, you're not lowering my gas prices, you're just polluting the air in the surrounding community, we were going to charge you a $10,000 per day fine for each of those oil wells. And we were going to do this statewide. And that scared the hell out the oil industry. They didn't think we could do it, actually. And so at first, I told them, look, let's talk about the referendum. Let's talk about all these things together. And they blew me off. And then the bill passed out of my committee. And then the bill passed off the assembly floor. And then the bill passed out of the Senate Natural Resources Committee. And then the oil company came to me and said, well, if we pull back the referendum, will you pull back this bill? And I said, no, not a chance. If you pull back the referendum, I might limit this bill to just my neighborhood, because I have the largest urban oil field in the country, but y'all are going to pay for that harm from the Inglewood oil field one way or another. And to my surprise, they pulled the referendum back.
Wow.
They pulled back this $30 million effort, and we still got to hold them accountable in our neighborhood. I couldn't have imagined greater environmental wins coming out of California. And it wasn't just me, by the way. The Stand LA Coalition, Scope, Last Chance Alliance, Enviro Voters, countless organizations, People Power put the pressure. The campaign was ready to go with the Keep the Law campaign, by the way. They had raised $20 million to fight the oil companies. If this went to the ballot, it was going to be a fight. But we avoided that expensive ballot fight, and we still made more progress. I couldn't have been more excited for the environmental work we did this year.
And the governor signed that.
The governor signed it in the Inglewood oil field. So what this bill is going to do is it calls, one, for the field to be shut down by 2030, period. Cap and clean the wells, period.
Speaking of deadlines and target.
When that one's not a target, it's like you have to do this, period.
Okay.
It's not an ask. It's not a request. No wiggle room. You have to do this. But to make sure you do it, back to the point about targets and accountability, I'm going to charge you $10,000 per month per well that is a low-producing well that you haven't cleaned up. We estimate that could generate tens of millions of dollars. And when I knew that we were generating new state revenue, another thought occurred to me. Revenue often goes in like the dark hole of the state budget. How do we make sure this goes directly for the community who's paid the price for having these oil wells in the backyard? So we created a new fund in the Treasury, a repair fund, that holds all of this oil money and only can be appropriated within 2.5 miles of the field. It can go for green spaces, affordable housing, community development, kind of whatever we need it for to uplift our community, but it can only be spent by the state within 2.5 miles of our office, of the oil field, right in our community. So even if I'm not in office, the state couldn't repurpose this and send it somewhere else. This is our money that we paid for with our life expectancy, and now we get to invest it in the things we need while we shut down this oil field.
And so, that's a way of being very specific without violating the law. Let me put it that way.
Very much so. It's hard to be as direct as you'd like to be in the state, right? Especially, Prop 209 and so many other things. And then no matter what, anytime you target resources for specific communities or others, people who are not a part of that community wonder where their share is, right? And it's not a piece of pie. These aren't slices and more for one means less for another. It's about centering folks who are directly harmed by a problem in the solution that you're trying to create. And that's what we did with this oil field. If you live near this oil field and you have lost family members to respiratory and cardiac conditions as a result of this oil field, we're going to shut it down and we're going to make sure that they pay for it.
And there's a lot of other things that have gone on that are happening. This season is when the governor signs a bunch of stuff or doesn't sign a bunch of stuff.
That's right.
And then it either has to come back or it goes away forever. And so there's a lot of things that have happened that people have not noted. And one of those things is, it seems to me, are some big wins in the environmental justice space.
Huge wins.
As far as investment dollars coming into South LA in our green space.
Absolutely. And changing the way that we, think about environmental justice in the communities who are most harmed. Another bill we passed just this year had to do with urban heat. Right now, every year is the hottest year, right? We go back and we're like, hey, it's the hottest year we've ever had in LA. The next year, the new hottest year. And the question is, what are we going to do about that? Because not everybody has air conditioning in their home. We got a lot right.
I don't have any in mind.
Builders weren't required to put air conditioning back when we would get the ocean breeze and our climate was, in a different space.
Yeah, I didn't need it.
That's right.
Until recently, yeah.
And now you do. And we've got elders and we've got seniors who can't leave their homes, right? So we set up cooling centers every so often. But what if you can't get to them? We have folks who are losing their lives because of urban heat. And part of the reason this has become a problem is because we're not planning for it either. Cities aren't planning for it. Counties aren't planning for it. The state isn't planning for it. And because you're not planning for the hottest year on record, you're not investing in the infrastructure. And if you planned for it and a disaster happened, like the hottest year on record, you could apply for FEMA dollars. We do that with other emergencies. If a big earthquake hits, we plan for earthquakes. That's why you got to rebar big buildings. That's why you've got to build certain conditions. So if a big earthquake hits, the federal government steps in. We see this with hurricanes down on the East Coast and in the South. Tornado Alley in the middle of our country, but nobody's planning for urban heat. So we wrote a bill this year that would require cities and counties and jurisdictions across the state to plan for urban heat. It's a real climate emergency. It's costing real folks their lives disproportionately. Black folks, communities of color, and older folks, our elders. And so once we now have to start planning for it, if a heat wave comes through like something we haven't seen before, we can apply for federal relief from the federal government to make sure that folks can build the infrastructure and get the cooling and sustainable cooling that they need and deserve.
Talking with Assembly Member Isaac Bryan. And phone lines are open, 800-920-1580. We are unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580.
Say the quiet part out loud. KBLA Talk 1580. Tabitha Smiley's new book, The Covenant with Black America, 20 years later, is now on sale everywhere. This classic text shot to #1 on the New York Times bestsellers list almost 2 decades ago. If you have the original book, you will surely want to get this 20th anniversary edition with powerful new contributions from today's leading voices. This 20th anniversary edition presents a compelling blend of historical insights and contemporary urgency in this critical and unprecedented election year. Get your copy of The Covenant with Black America 20 years later today.
We're with Bridget, whose husband won't be home for months, and whose daughter is due any day. We're with Mike, who's leaving home to protect his family and yours. We're with all service members and their families who need community, connection, and maybe a bit of magic. Are you with them? Learn more at uso.org today.
Our daughter Jessie loves playing detective.
A clue.
But since we discovered she has sensitive skin, we've been playing detective too.
We thought the problem was our puppy.
But it was actually our old detergent.
Aha.
So we switched to Tide Free and Gentle. Tide cleans better than the leading competitive free detergent, and it doesn't leave behind irritating residues.
Plus, Tide Free and Gentle has no dyes or perfumes, so it's gentle on her skin.
Case closed.
If it's got to be clean, it's got to be Tide Free and Gentle.
If you're living with dry age-related macular degeneration or dry AMD, you may be at risk for developing geographic atrophy or GA. GA can be unpredictable and progress rapidly, leading to irreversible vision loss. Now there's something you can do to
slow it down and get it going slower.
Izervay is proven to slow GA progression.
Izervay gets GA going slower.
Izervay or avacincaptad pagel is a prescription eye injection used to treat GA. Don't take it if you have an infection or active swelling in or around your eye. Izervay can cause eye infection, retinal detachment, or increased risk of wet AMD. Izervay may temporarily increase eye pressure. Your vision may be impaired after an eye injection or exam. Don't delay. Ask your doctor about Izervay today.
Izervay gets GA going slower.
Visit Izervay.com. That's IZERVAY.com.
Thanks for waking up with Dominique DiPrima on KBLA Talk 1580.
Okay, I'm here with Assembly Member Isaac Bryan. He's actually my Assembly Member, my district. And Assembly Member Bryan, I know you did that, you did the legislation where they have to say, overturn the initiative,
right,
keep the initiative. Voters changed your mind or you didn't change your mind. I'm looking at all these ads and stuff right now in this election year, and so they're not referendums.
Correct.
And they just say anything. And
they say anything.
Can you explain to me, why can they just lie? Like, I'm looking at Prop 33, and I don't even know where you are on this. I know the governor's come out against it. I know I'm for it. But the things that they're saying in those ads are demonstrably untrue. How do they just say anything in an ad?
Let me tell you, said this was like, I'm a renter.
Right.
Right? I'm the only renter in the legislature from Los Angeles. I'm the only member of the Black Caucus who's a renter. I don't own a house. And so when you're looking at tenants' rights and protections, those are critical things for me.
Right.
Important things worth fighting for. The reason they can lie is because truth doesn't have to be a part of politics, which is why misinformation, manipulation, and oftentimes they'll call it parody, right? That's what Elon Musk will do. He'll put out a completely fake video and call it parody. I mean, the truth is whatever you believe. So, the Republicans are getting better at framing their lies at truth. Folks on the ballot measures always have framed both sides. I remember when we did Measure J some years ago here in LA County, right? Measure J was a measure for justice that I co-chaired with Eunice Hernandez that called for the County of Los Angeles to take 10% of its unrestricted dollars. We're talking $300 million, and invest it in affordable housing, youth development, small business support, and alternatives to incarceration. And it prohibited the sheriffs, the DAs, or probation from rebranding themselves as any of those things. That money was clear. It was about investing in community. That was the measure. Well, the opposition said they're trying to cut county jobs. They want to cut out nurses. They want to cut out essential workers because we ran this during the pandemic, right? So they called this a measure to get rid of essential workers, which was a complete lie. We were talking about building new infrastructure. In fact, we were just talking about how we were at that conference yesterday. JCOD, the County Department of Justice, Care and Opportunity, is paid for by Measure J.
Right, and the full benefits of that are really only now kicking in after different challenges and end runs around what the voters really wanted.
Right.
And this is the stuff that we have been asking for as voters. Alternatives to incarceration, more mental health support, more different kinds of programs. The entire JCOD department, I think a lot of people don't even understand or know.
Right.
And one of the reasons I talk about it a lot is because when we fight for stuff, when we vote for stuff and it wins, and then there are positive impacts, we need to know about them. Otherwise, we go around going, oh, my vote doesn't mean anything. Nothing ever changes. Well, and it's just not true.
Even more important than that, when we get any kind of wins, the pushback is immediate.
Right.
On Measure J, it came through legal challenges that held up the measure for nearly 2 years. But folks want you to believe that we're not making progress in certain areas. Folks want you to believe that good can't happen or won't happen, and that it doesn't matter who's in various positions because the outcomes are the same. And I'll tell you this, shutting down the Inglewood oil field, 2-decade fight. Every single one of my predecessors would tell you that they wished they could have passed the bill that we passed, but they couldn't because the makeup of the legislature wouldn't have allowed it, and they didn't have the juice because they didn't chair the committee. Right, so by chairing the Natural Resource Committee as the first black chair, coming from this community, having the largest oil field, it gave me a different set of tools to really push this forward, and that's what we did. But that's real change. And in 2030, when those oil field wells are closed, capped, and cleaned up, and now we're having community conversations about what do we do with all this land? Do we turn it into a giant park? Do we turn it into affordable housing? Do we what do we want to turn it into? That's a conversation we'll get to have now that for the last, several decades before my lifetime wasn't even believed as possible.
How will the community be able to weigh in on that conversation? Because I think the fear is it'll be a bunch of condos for gentrifiers.
Right. No, first of all, we can't afford to not have affordable housing, period, anywhere. Anywhere we build has to be for folks who can live here. Like I said, I pay rent. I pay rent right up the street. And even right up the street, it's way too much.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? It's unbelievable. And, I'm like a college-educated young professional who just married a college-educated young professional. We're like, this is impossible. That's the reality for Los Angeles right now. We've got work to do to bring down the costs and bring affordable housing. But I think folks are going to be able to weigh in all through the process. Whatever our greater community needs are, those are the needs that we've got to use with our open space. One of those needs is housing, but how do you make sure that it's affordable, but also can you even clean and remediate this oil field to the point that we could live on it?
Right.
And that's a question I have, and then somebody reminded me that the place I currently live was a former landfill, right, which is why my house shifts a little bit, right? And so we already live on, kind of oil polluted soil that's been cleaned up and turned into kind of the urban center of Los Angeles. All of this was oil drilling at one point or landfills at one point. And so, I'm hopeful that through the right kind of, community conversations and investments, we can take that space and make it whatever we need. But I know what we don't need, which is a bunch of active oil wells that are killing us without even delivering the kind of oil that would lower our gas prices. They just don't want to clean them up because it's expensive.
Yeah. So back to we only have a minute and a half here till news, traffic, and sports, and we'll continue on the other side. Back to my original question, if they can just lie, I think the Prop 33 is the best example because the lying is so outrageous.
Right.
It will take away protections from seniors. What are you talking about? All it does is repeal Costa-Hawkins so cities and counties can decide whether they want rent control. It will do this, it will do that. So we can't stop them from doing that, is what you're saying. People can lie and say anything. So that means we have to learn as voters how to just tune out the ads and seek other sources of information.
Right, and stay civically engaged in a real meaningful way. Do a lot of reading. Ask yourself if things make sense. Ask yourself who's telling you this lie. If it is the apartment association telling you that repealing Costa-Hawkins will hurt seniors, you might want to ask yourself. The source matters. I mean, you also have to decide if you are just hearing what you want to hear, right? If you believe, if you're looking for a reason to hate a measure, hate a person, or believe that something is happening some sort of way, if that's your orientation and you're looking for validation, you're going to go find it. And then ask yourself where you got that information. If that's credible to you, then that is what it is. We've got misinformed voters every single election cycle. It's why it's so difficult sometimes to make the progress we need, because we can't all go the same direction, even if we all share the same values and want to reach the same outcomes. But we've got to do all we can to make sure that folks stay engaged and do our part to always bring as much information as we can.
I mean, yeah, and follow the money is always a good start. Like, who is paying for this and what do they get out of it? We'll continue our conversation with Assemblymember Isaac Bryan when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
She's reclaiming her time on KBLA Talk 1580. More First Things First with Dominique DiPrima when we come forward.
I'm Bree Wood with 4 things you should know from BIN News. Retail sales were up 0.4% in September over the previous month, according to numbers out from the Census Bureau. Retail stores saw the biggest increase in sales, followed by clothing and food. Electronics and appliance stores saw sales drop more than 3%. The Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office is reviewing the Menendez brothers case. DA George Gaskin noted that their understanding of sexual violence has evolved since the 1990s. However, no decision about possible resentencing can be commented on at this time. The man who was arrested outside of last Saturday's Trump rally in California is officially suing the Riverside County Sheriff's Department for defamation. Vern Miller says Riverside County Sheriff Chad Bianco fabricated the assassination attempt allegation to appear like a hero. And during the BET Hip Hop Awards, Kendrick Lamar dominated, taking home a historic 8 trophies. Get BIN News on demand 24/7 at BINnews.com.
Hi, I'm Kyle at Blindster.com. I started Blindster in 2010 in my garage after I overpaid for new blinds. I researched the industry, hired my mom, and 14 years later, we're one of the largest retailers of custom blinds in the U.S. Don't pay too much for new blinds. Go to Blindster.com.
Is this the title? This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
The Dodgers are playing like they're supposed to be in the World Series. They are not messing around with the Mets in New York. Another impressive performance Thursday night for the Dodgers by the pitchers and hitters. The Dodgers cruised to a 10-2 win over the Mets in Game 4 of the National League Championship Series. The Dodgers have a 3-1 lead in the best of 7. They can close out the Mets today in Game 5 and advance to the World Series against the Yankees or Cleveland. Mookie Betts was 4 for 6 at the plate with a homer and 4 RBIs. The Mets did not score after the 3rd inning and left 12 men on base. Game 5 today at 2 o'clock local time. The Lakers and Clippers are winding down their preseason schedule. The Lakers won Thursday night at Phoenix. They played their final preseason game tonight at Golden State. The Clippers had a 22-point win over Sacramento Thursday night in their final preseason game. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA Talk 1580. Talk radio. That's music to your ears. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580.
That morning chill means truck season.
5 more minutes.
No snoozing. Do it all in a Chevy Colorado or Silverado, including the class-leading range of the Silverado EV.
Talking to me?
Work, play, hauling, off-roading, a Chevy truck can take it all.
Okay, I'm up.
It's Chevy Truck Season. Get 0% financing on all 2024 Silverado 1500 pickups when you finance with GM Financial. Chevrolet, together, let's drive.
0% APR for 36 months. Monthly payment is $27.78 for every $1,000 you finance. Example down payment 9.3%. Must finance with GM Financial. Some customers may not qualify. Not available at least in some other offers. Take new retail delivery by 10/31/24.
As a mom, comforting my family is what I do best. Vicks Vapor Stick provides soothing, non-medicated Vicks Vapors in an easy-to-apply stick. And it dries fast, so there's no mess. I use it to comfort myself and my family.
Thanks, Mom.
Vicks Vapo Stick, soothing comfort for the whole family. And when you need more comfort for yourself, try Vicks Vapo Shower Max for steamy Vicks Vapors. Use as directed. Vapo Stick for use ages 4 and up. Vapo Shower Max use for adults only.
Our daughter Jessie loves playing detective.
A clue.
But since we discovered she has sensitive skin, we've been playing detective too.
We thought the problem was our puppy.
But it was actually our old detergent.
Aha.
So we switched to Tide Free and Gentle. Tide cleans better than the leading competitive free detergent, and it doesn't leave behind irritating residues.
Plus, Tide Free and Gentle has no dyes or perfumes, so it's gentle on her skin.
Case closed.
If it's got to be clean, it's got to be Tide Free and Gentle.
Moments like making my kids my famous meatballs mean a lot to me. But after being diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer, or MBC, which is breast cancer that has spread to other parts of the body, they mean even more. I take Ibrance, palbociclib.
Ibrance 125 milligram tablets with an aromatase inhibitor is for adults with HR-positive, HER2-negative MBC as the first hormonal-based therapy. Ask your doctor about Ibrance and visit Ibrance.com. Ibrance may cause low white blood cell counts that may lead to serious infections. Ibrance may cause severe inflammation of the lungs. Both of these can lead to death. Tell your doctor right away if you have new or worsening symptoms, including trouble breathing, shortness of breath, cough, or chest pain. Before taking Ibrance, tell your doctor if you have fever, chills, or other signs of infection, liver or kidney problems, are or plan to become pregnant, or are breastfeeding. Common side effects include low red blood cell and low platelet counts, infections, tiredness, nausea, sore mouth, abnormalities in liver blood tests, diarrhea, hair thinning or loss, vomiting, rash, and loss of appetite.
Black Women for Wellness and Stand LA are standing up against harmful oil drilling in South Los Angeles. Our Bad Neighbors campaign exposes the serious health risks of drilling in our neighborhoods. You've seen the billboards, posters, and coffee sleeves around South LA. Now join the movement to protect our health, our families, and our future.
Visit bwwla.org/no-drilling to learn more and get involved. That's bwwla.org/no-drilling.
Broadcasting live from Leimert Park, USA. Welcome back to your home for unapologetically progressive radio, KBLA Talk 1580.
And we are talking with Assembly Member Isaac Bryan. Your district is huge. You represent not just the spot we're sitting in right now,
no,
but heading all the way west. It's the 55th Assembly District, Baldwin Hills, Marina, Mar Vista, Del Rey, Palms, Pico Robertson, all that, Beverly Grove. Yesterday, you and I were part of a conference. Together We Thrive.
That's right.
We talked about Justice, Care, and Opportunities Department, which comes out of Measure J, and the voters' will to do something different, what they call a care-first model. Everything is not cops, 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 law enforcement, law enforcement.
Right.
Some money has to go to community building. So one of the pieces I had the opportunity to interview Hit Boy. It was a great conversation. His dad was in prison since he was 3, got out, recently went in again, and just all the ways that impacted him in his life. You yourself come out of the foster care system. And that's another big piece of what we talked about in JCOD yesterday. These are what we call system-impacted persons, people whose parents or themselves have been in prison, people who have come through the foster care system, which, as Molly Bell pointed out, it helps some people, but there's a lot of harm there as well. And I know, obviously, for you, that's personal because you were a foster kid yourself.
Yeah.
And I think you have some work that you're doing around that. I know it was a big, big, big piece of what Karen Bass was championing, both in the Assembly and in the Congress.
Yeah, it's my understanding in the history of the state of California, there's only 3 of us who were not raised by our biological parents. In my case, a lot of folks already know this. My mother got pregnant from a rape. She was a teenager. She couldn't carry me. That's what it was immediately. Deep poverty, drug use in the family, and I was adopted in my second foster home, a home that did foster care for 26 years and adopted 9 of us. But having had hundreds of foster siblings in my family, because we were a foster family for anyone who needed a place to be, especially the hardest to place cases, I saw several ways the system impacted some of my siblings and foster siblings in more nuanced ways. For example, if your parents pass away, anybody, you're due survivor benefits. They pay into Social Security. They're not going to withdraw that. And so the federal government gives you a piece of that back. It's like a generational wealth.
You, the child,
gets
Social Security benefits from your parent if they die.
Correct. Under survivor benefits. And if you are in foster care, the counties have been applying for those benefits on your behalf, oftentimes without even telling you you're eligible for these special benefits, and then just pocketing that into the way that government works. So I actually know many, many foster youth who aged out of the system, who had lost their parents, and the county had been collecting tens of thousands of dollars of their survivor benefits, but they aged out with nothing. They went right to the streets. They were unhoused, many of them mothers, folks who couldn't find stable employment.
The foster kids themselves.
The foster kids themselves aged out and were ass out, even though they had tens of thousands of benefits that the counties should have set aside directly for them. This has been going on since the 80s, and it doesn't just happen in California. It happens all across the country. But if California changes this, then many other states will follow.
So the state applies for the money.
Mm-hmm. The counties apply.
The counties apply for the money, and then they pay themselves back.
Yeah.
Quote unquote.
Yeah, it's just like part of the budget. It's like they treat it like a revenue stream, right? It's not your money. It's, just part of our revenue as a county that we use to do whatever we do. Even though they get specific money from the federal government for the child welfare system broadly, this is specific money for you. And so we wrote the bill last year. And we sent it to the governor with bipartisan support, and it got vetoed. It was wild. It was painful. I was shocked. And we came back this year, and we ran the bill to set these survivor benefits aside. And we got it to the governor. It wasn't in the budget. And so I was concerned, because a lot of times he'll say, look, if it wasn't in the budget, I can't sign it. But, we put as much pressure as we could, and, we got a signature. And so now in California, going forward, they can't steal your survivor benefits. They have to give that money directly to you, set it aside for you, use it directly for your benefit. The real problem, though, is that's going forward. It's not lost on me, all of the children who have had that money taken in the past. I don't even know what that number would be, but there's a lot of work we've got to do to make sure the needs of our foster families and the children who are most impacted, disproportionately Black, more likely to underperform in school, more likely to end up in the criminal legal system, less likely to become your state assembly member or your radio host. We've got to invest in those youth. We've got to invest in those kids, and that's, part of the bill package we try to run every single year.
Well, congratulations on that. It seems like something that wouldn't happen that much, but it probably does. I mean, you're talking about the foster care system. Kids are in there for lots of different reasons.
It's not every kid whose parents passed away, right? My parents didn't pass away. That's not what led to me being in the system. So it's not everybody. It's a specific group who have been harmed in this specific way, who are due this specific type of financial compensation, and now they will have it going forward. That's the orientation we try to bring to all of the work that we do, right? It is South LA, who's been impacted by these oil wells in the Baldwin Hills Inglewood oil field. We're going to shut it down. If the oil companies are going to pay for it, they're going to pay for it directly to this community that's been harmed. Everything we do has that orientation. It's how we've always been, and it's how we're going to continue to be going forward.
And I think I like to point out, that I've seen data that a lot of our South LA schools, the Black schools particularly, some have up to 60, 70% of those children that are attending those schools are foster kids. So when you talk about foster kids, you're not talking about some little splinter group. We're talking about a huge number of the children in our community.
LA County has a larger foster care system than 40 states, right? We're a county of 10 million people. I can tell you which zip codes foster kids are most likely to come from. It's all interrelated, though. It's structural. Deep poverty, low home ownership rate, low wages, environmental hazards, high police presence, underperforming and underfunded schools. All these things get stacked on top of each other. And that's the web of harm that we have to structurally try to pull apart piece by piece and replace with things like justice, care, and opportunity. Going back to where we were yesterday, it's a really powerful thing to have that department in the county. There's no other county in the state of California that has a department dedicated to justice, care, and opportunity. That was a major, major fight, a major, major struggle. It took decades of organizing by folks who have been directly impacted. And then, I was grateful to be a part of the coalition and to co-chair the ballot measure that ultimately got it funded, and not just one time, but in perpetuity. Forever there will be money for this.
And hopefully, do you think we'll see this duplicated in other counties or across the country? I mean, I would love to see it.
I like to believe that when LA does something right, and when LA County does something right, it inspires the rest of California. When California does it right, it inspires the rest of the country. And when the country does it right, it inspires the rest of the world. We don't do everything right. We've got many, many things that we've got to make right. But I think that's kind of the core of why, I wake up every day thinking about what we can be an example for, what kind of light we can shine on something that feels hopeless and move it towards a positive way. And we're not going to win every fight first time. We're not going to win every battle the first time. I just told you with the survivor benefits, it took me 2 shots. Many of you didn't even know about this bill. You definitely didn't know the governor vetoed it last year. You didn't know we had to bring it back, make some adjustments. And you probably don't know that I have to come back next year for the disability benefits. Right? The same thing they're doing with survivor benefits, they do for kids with special needs, where they're due specific money for them because of their disability, and the counties are taking that. So we're going to be back next year trying to get those direct resources for those kids and lay the model for the rest of the country.
I mean, this is our second shot trying to outlaw involuntary servitude inside the prisons. And hopefully Prop 6 passes this time. I know Sidney Comlager tried it, and it failed.
In the Senate, in her house. It's things don't just happen because you want them to. And, I wish they did. If we did, if that's the way that I could make the world move, folks would have housing, folks would be thriving, we'd have universal basic incomes, poverty wouldn't be a thing, hunger wouldn't be a thing, scarcity wouldn't be a thing. And I actually believe many of those outcomes we can still get to, but we can't just get there because I want them. We can't just get there because I'm mad about them. We can't just get there because I'm yelling about them. It takes strategy. It takes organized, thoughtful, deliberate strategy.
But to be clear, I mean, you've spent your fair share of time yelling about issues and protesting, and that's part of it. I mean, that's part of how we move the needle.
I think that's critical to the work. There are some folks who need to just be mad strategically, right? And strategically towards the outcomes that you're trying to get. I always moved in coalition with folks to make change, whether it was the BSAP program, which is under attack right now, right? We organized. I wrote the report around policing our students. And in LAUSD, they established the Black Student Achievement Plan. I sat on that task force that called for removing the money from the school police and investing it in Black students. That's under attack. Speaking about the wins that are under attack. And folks need to be rightfully outraged, but you've got to turn that outrage into tactful, strategic, creative organizing, and you've got to recognize which players are in which positions to make the change. Some folks got to be in the streets. Some folks need to be in elected office. Some folks need to be in philanthropy. Some folks need to be in the university. Some folks need to be just active and engaged, ready to vote. We've all got roles to play, but they've got to be headed towards the same justice, liberation that we all believe in. And if we don't believe in the same thing, that's a different question.
Yeah, absolutely it is. It's just that, I hear people saying, well, protesting doesn't work. Well, it does, but I think it's always in combination with strategy.
It absolutely does.
What is it? An inside-outside strategy, right?
Yeah, and I think the inside-outside is the hardest strategy.
Yeah.
Because we don't trust the systems that weren't designed for us, right?
Right.
I remember there were many task force and commissions when the Sheriff Oversight Commission was established in LA County. There were many, many people who established that commission. I'm thinking of Mark Anthony Johnson. I'm thinking of Patrice Cullors. I'm thinking of Lex Stepling and many others who wouldn't serve on that commission, right? Because it's difficult to go inside and out. And not that they couldn't have risen to the challenge, but you have to kind of decide where it is you think you can make the biggest impact. For me, when I was in movement space and kind of organizing to make change, I was often our inside-outside person, right? Whenever there was a task force, whenever there was somebody we had to send into the meeting with the mayor or send into the meeting with the council who was going to come out with what we sent them in there to get us, that was my role. That's why I ran for office, because at a certain point you get tired of meeting with folks and asking them to help move a conversation forward, and you just get in there and you start doing it yourself.
Talking with Assembly Member Isaac Bryan. He is the first African-American chair of the Natural Resources Committee.
Natural Resources.
I'm going to get that. Natural Resources Committee, and he is the Assembly Member for District 55. Conversation continues on KBLA Talk 1580.
More of First Things First with Dominique DiPrima when we come forward. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580, connecting you with services and solutions. The Los Angeles Regional Food Bank is on a mission to fight hunger and provide nutritious food to those in need across our community. They partner with federal, state, and local programs advocating for better policies and funding for critical hunger relief programs like Cal Fresh, the Emergency Food Assistance Program, and the Child and Adult Care Food Program. The food bank works with coalitions and local representatives to make sure hunger is addressed in every district of LA County. They also run nutrition education campaigns, raise hunger awareness, and source nutritious food for distribution, all while supporting regulations that allow food pantries to operate safely. Want to help? Visit lafoodbank.org or call 323-234-3030 to volunteer or find a food bank near you. Together, we can ensure that no one goes hungry in Los Angeles County. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
Tips to help improve basic steps for building a budget in 2024. Building a budget can help you achieve and reach your financial goals. With a budget, you can keep track of your spending, avoid and get out of debt, limit overspending, pay bills on time, and build solid savings habits. What's the best way to get started? Figure out how much to set aside for expenses, like rent, mortgage, bills, groceries, and entertainment. Understanding your past financial habits can help you make the proper adjustments for your budget. Adjusting to a budget can take time as you work to find the right balance, but keep working on it. For more financial health tips, visit chase.com or stop by a local branch. This segment is sponsored by J.P. Morgan Chase & Company. Asthma Peak Week is almost here, September 15th through 21st, and it's time to pay attention. Peak Week is a critical time of the year for asthma flare-ups and can lead to hospitalization. Did you know that Black Americans are approximately 5 times more likely than white Americans to be hospitalized for asthma? Stay aware, have a plan, and spread the word on Asthma Peak Week. For more active asthma care tips, visit luma-edu.com. This message is brought to you by Amgen and AstraZeneca.
Eggs are a staple in our diets, and there's only one egg with more delicious farm fresh taste plus superior nutrition. Eggland's Best. With more vitamins, including 6 times more vitamin D and 10 times more vitamin E, plus 25% less saturated fat than ordinary eggs. Available in so many delicious varieties: classic, cage-free, and organic. Eggland's Best. Better taste, better nutrition, better eggs.
The conversation continues right now with Dominique DiPrima on First Things First.
The KBLA 1580 chat is hopping, coming out of our weekly Freedman Fridays. For those confused, Freedman Fridays is 7 to 8 every single Friday. Sometimes we keep it going in the final hour of the show. Sometimes we'll pivot to another guest. Could be a lawmaker, comedian, could just be me, you, and this microphone. And also, we don't limit our conversation about reparations only to Fridays either, by the way, for those who are interested. Assembly Member Isaac Bryan already did a full hour on reparations. It's available on YouTube if you'd like to hear it. He also attended our emergency town hall meeting. I don't have further questions for him about reparations. If you do, I suggest you write an email or, show up at one of his events. I will only ask you this. You said, for those who missed the show, and you can still get it, it's on YouTube, it's wherever you get your podcast, you are still committed to bringing back those bills or similar and moving forward the California reparations agenda.
That's easy, of course. Actually, in fact, been thinking about 1331 a lot. I mean, there was no funding mechanism, right? And so as I was talking earlier about it, our environmental justice space, we established a funding mechanism setting a penalty on the oil companies to make sure community actually got resources. And so if we bring back a symbolic bank account, I'm not actually interested in that. We got to figure out the funding structure. And I know initially the senator went into trying to figure out how to set aside surplus money. We're in a deficit. But, I've got some ideas that I saw some colleagues working with around different revenue streams that come in that the team and I are kicking around that specific idea. But I've also got 2 or 3 other ideas I'm not going to share with folks right now, but I think one of them is actually going to have a major impact on our ability to move all of this work forward. But we can't introduce legislation until we're back in session. And so for now, I'm just going to continue doing the community work, meeting with folks and making sure that we're spreading resources and love everywhere we can. This year, the office has helped over 1,000 people with just EDD cases. We've helped folks continue to stay in their housing. We're partnering with as many people during the holidays to make sure that folks have the needs, both Thanksgiving and just the broader holidays, because I got a family of 15. There were 12 kids. There were 13 kids. I know what it was like to have to stretch $1. And so that's why that's always really important to me. We will be back with Christmas in the park. And if we've outgrown the park that we have been in historically, we'll find a bigger park. But we're going to serve and continue to serve. When we come back in January, we're going to move the policy agenda forward quick. But not just on that front, on all fronts. Cap and trade is coming back on the environmental front. We've got work to do to make sure community knows when there's oil spills. By the way, you didn't know the Inglewood oil field had an oil spill this year. There's a reason you didn't know. They don't want you to know.
No, I did not know that.
Right. They don't want you to know. I mean, there's a lot of different things that we've got to continue to do. We've got to go back and fight for the disability benefits for foster youth. This year was actually our most productive and successful year as an office, having 14 bills signed by the governor. It was pretty unprecedented. Actually, I haven't heard of anybody who had more legislation signed in a budget deficit. I'm really proud of that because we're learning how to navigate this system as effectively as possible. Next year, I think it'll be even our strongest year. I'm also becoming one of the elders in the Capitol. It's crazy to think about, right? But there's something like 40 or 50 assembly members who came in after me. The Black Caucus is losing 4 members who are terming out. Every single other member is going to be reelected, some by historic margins because it's a presidential election cycle. Hopefully we can replace those 4 outgoing members with new members of the caucus. In some of those seats, it's looking harder and harder. In some of those seats, we feel really, really strong. We think we're going to bring Stockton back into the Black Caucus. Stockton was lost a while back, but we think we're going to bring a new member to the caucus out in Stockton. We're hoping to maintain the historic South Central seat where the first Black Assembly member ever came from. We're going to lose some stuff.
57.
Yep, we're going to lose.
Which is Sade El-Hawari versus Efren Martinez.
Absolutely,
Martinez has so far not responded to coming on this show, which would tell you something. But so the CLBC, which people are pretty angry with, and sure. I think rightfully so, given the failure on reparations. You're the only member that's come in the studio and sat down with me. I appreciate that.
Of course.
Only member that showed up to the emergency town hall meeting was 12 persons.
Yeah.
You're saying it could shrink to 8, or it's likely
not 8. We're I can't remember the exact. We are predicting to lose because we hold. Black population is shifting around California, right? So picking up Moreno Valley, we got the first Black Assemblyman in Moreno Valley ever right now. But Chris Holden was in Pasadena, and he's termed out. We're not picking up Pasadena Upland. That'll be a guy named John Harbedian. We lose that. We had a member in Sacramento who's running for mayor right now. There's not a Black candidate for the assembly seat up there. We'll lose that seat because he's termed out. But like I said, we will pick up Stockton. And so, there's just a shift. It's a generational shift whenever you've got 4 members termed out. But I am excited that literally every single member of the CLBC will be reelected who's on the ballot. There's no question about that. And you can come get at me November 5th and see whether that's the outcome or not. But folks are working hard in their communities. We need to increase our representation and orient it towards a policy agenda that continues to move towards liberation and justice.
All right. I appreciate your coming in once again and continuing the conversation. I'm sure we'll have many more. We always do. We've got a minute here. How would you like to spend it?
Mostly, I just want folks to, remember that elections come and go. This is my first presidential cycle on the ballot. I'm glad people are engaged across all levels. And there's things that you can like, dislike, be frustrated about, organize about. You should. But you got to remember what you're fighting for and how you really plan to get there. I know what I'm fighting for, and I'm grateful for all the folks in community that are in that fight with me. We're going to move all of this work forward, and I'm looking forward, Dominique, to being back in February next year talking about what legislation is actively on the table, what are the roadblocks folks need to get ready for, what are the opportunities we need to organize for. But until then, I'm just going to continue to serve out in community and make sure folks have all the resources that our office can provide from now until I'm back up there.
All right. Well, thank you for coming in. Great to talk with you. I forgot to talk about it today, but tomorrow we're having a Zoom meeting about our next trip to Africa, which is in June. If you want to come, you're interested, go to africanfocus.org, and we will send you the link. You can email them. You can call the number that's at the website, africanfocus.org. We're going to West Africa. You can come with us. That meeting is tomorrow morning. The best of Tavis Smiley is up next. He's got highlights from the week that passed. And I want to quote Jim Brown once again, the decision-making process for all my reparationists here. Jim Brown said, eliminate the negative, establish the facts, and choose your best option. Eliminate the negative, establish the facts, and choose your best option. I'm Dominique DiPrima. Like my mama used to say, history is now, and we are making it together. Until Monday, one love.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.